The sterile white of the examination chamber pulsed softly with ambient light, like the glow of a deep-sea jellyfish. Joshua Halen sat upright on the curved diagnostic pod, stripped to his waist, breathing slowly. A clear dome covered the top half of his body, and a series of multi-jointed arms hovered above his torso like uncertain birds of prey. The air smelled like ozone and antiseptic. "Remain motionless," the alien medic said in a gravelly voice. Its name was Veln, and its species hailed from a planet where gravity was twice that of Earth's. That explained the thick, squat limbs and heavy gait. Joshua nodded once, not moving. He had been on the Galactic Relief Outpost for 4 days, consulting on an atmospheric filtration issue in the lower decks. A routine assignment. Nothing fancy. Just a human engineer doing his job. But after a fainting spell during a lift cycle, station protocol had flagged him for a mandatory medical scan. Veln's eyes, 3 of them, arranged vertically narrowed as it studied the display projected into the air. Something flickered in its expression. Not quite alarm, but not routine either. Its hands moved faster now, tapping at invisible controls. Joshua frowned. "Is everything all right?" Veln didn't answer immediately. It turned to another alien medic, a taller, thinner one named Lin, who spoke only in short, clipped sentences. The two exchanged words in rapid Galtrade, their voices low. Joshua caught fragments. Stage 4. Accelerated tissue depletion. Neurological interference already begun. Then Veln turned back. "You are infected with a parasitic organism," it said. "Unknown origin. It has embedded along your intestinal lining and is feeding on host nutrients. It is advanced." Joshua blinked. "What kind of parasite?" "We have not cataloged it. It resembles a segmented worm, approximately 2 meters long. It has invaded your digestive system and is secreting neurotoxins. Left unchecked, it will compromise motor functions, then organ failure." Joshua's mouth opened slightly. He scratched the back of his neck. "Segmented worm, huh?" "Correct." Joshua exhaled, climbed off the pod slowly, and reached for his pack on the floor. "Hold on." Veln made a motion toward him. "You must not exert yourself." "I'm not. Just give me a second." He rummaged through the side pocket of his bag and pulled out a battered white pill bottle. He shook one into his palm and tossed it in his mouth. Veln stared. "What have you done?" Joshua swallowed with a gulp of water. "Took a dewormer. Albendazole. Got it from the station's general store when I packed for this trip. I haven't had a tapeworm in years, but I know the signs." Relin stepped forward, its fingers twitching. "You do not comprehend the severity. This is not a tapeworm. It is a Class 5 extraneous parasitic entity." Joshua sat back down, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, we call them tapeworms. Common in undeveloped areas back home. You can get them from undercooked meat or dirty water. I worked in disaster zones for 5 years. This is standard." Veln took a step back, visibly disoriented. "You have encountered this before?" "Not this exact one," Joshua admitted. "But close enough. Symptoms line up." "I was just about to self-medicate after the dizziness yesterday, but I figured I'd let you guys run your big space scan first." Relin turned and left the room without a word. Joshua lay back on the pod. "Anyway, I'll take another pill tomorrow, and one more the day after. Should be gone by the end of the week." Veln stood motionless. Then, quietly, it said, "We were preparing for surgical extraction and full organ isolation. A procedure with a survival rating of 37%. Joshua raised his eyebrows. "Yikes. Glad I beat you to it." News of the event classified on the station as Incident Halen spread like wildfire. Joshua quickly became the subject of hushed conversations in mess halls and corridors. He tried to return to his routine, but he couldn't go 5 meters without someone asking him to recount the moment he defied death with a pill. He was assigned a temporary assistant, a nervous young analyst named Jessa Penley, who kept stealing glances at him during work shifts. "You really knew what it was?" she asked one afternoon while they ran diagnostics on a failing oxygen regulator. "I had a hunch," Joshua replied. "Seen the signs before. I was stationed in western Madagascar once. Whole village got hit with them. I've still got the field report. But the scan said it was feeding on your nerves." Joshua tightened a bolt and shrugged. "Some of them do that. Most people only catch them once. Bodies adapt." Jessa looked both horrified and impressed. Later that night, Veln requested a private meeting. "I require your expertise," Veln said, gesturing to a sealed chamber containing another patient. Joshua stepped inside and saw a hulking alien from a methane-based world lying comatose. A display showed a similar parasite, though larger, coiled inside its abdomen. We detected the same organism, Veln explained. But this species cannot metabolize your medication. We seek an equivalent compound. Joshua rubbed his temples. All right, pull up the biochemistry profile. Let's reverse engineer it. He spent the next 16 hours in the lab, working with Veln and 2 others to synthesize a derivative compound compatible with the alien's physiology. It wasn't perfect, but after the 4th iteration, the parasite began to disintegrate. The patient's vitals stabilized within an hour. Veln turned to him afterward. You have saved a life. Joshua leaned against a wall, exhausted. Just did what I knew. By the 3rd week, the station's medical wing had been retrofitted with a new protocol. They called it Procedure Halen. It involved scanning for the parasite, administering a species-appropriate variant of the dewormer, and monitoring for 72 hours. Success rate, 94%. Joshua, meanwhile, was trying to finish his original job repairing the filtration system when another event rattled the station. An exploratory vessel returned from an uncharted moon with a crew of 6. All were unconscious. Scans revealed the same parasite, but mutated. It had adapted to resist the synthesized drug. This thing learns fast, Jessa said as they viewed the new data. Too fast, Joshua muttered. We need a different approach. They isolated a surviving fragment of the parasite and placed it in a sealed containment dish. Joshua stared at it. It writhed faintly, its translucent segments pulsing. Could we genetically sabotage it? Jessa asked. Maybe, Joshua said. Or we feed it something it can't digest. Starve it out without hurting the host. Veln entered with a data slate. We have located a protein strain from your planet's marine fauna. Toxic to the organism. We require synthesis. Joshua grinned. Let me guess. Sardines. Species, Clippia haringus. Yup, sardines. They worked nonstop for the next 30 hours, creating an ingestible capsule that mimicked the protein. Joshua personally oversaw its insertion into one of the afflicted crew. The parasite lost cohesion within minutes. By day 5, all 6 crew members had regained consciousness. One of them, a grizzled surveyor named Brannick, shook Joshua's hand as he sat up in recovery. Didn't think I'd wake up again, Brannick said. Neither did we, Joshua replied. Glad you made it. The parasite was eventually classified as a galactic zoonotic threat. But its defeat thanks to an earthborne pill and a little borrowed marine protein became a case study in cross-species medicine. Joshua finally finished rebuilding the filtration system and submitted his report. He was preparing to leave when Jessa caught up to him at the docking bay. You sure you don't want to stay? She asked. I've been here long enough, he said. Time to get back to Earth. Got a niece's birthday coming up. Jessa handed him a small box. Station gift. Don't open it until you're off-world. He smiled. Thanks. As the shuttle detached from the outpost and flared toward open space, Joshua opened the box. Inside was a vial, labeled Halen Protocol, Gen I. Below it, a note. For the next parasite. Just in case. Joshua leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. Yeah, he muttered. Just in case. The emergency beacon screamed through the fog of static at 3 o'clock station time, a high-pitched wail that cut across every comm panel like a knife between ribs. Joshua was still groggy from a 4-hour nap stolen between ship diagnostics when the floor beneath him shuddered. He jolted upright in the crew berth and cracked his head on the low bunk ceiling. Fantastic, he muttered, reaching for his boots with one hand and stabbing the comms panel with the other. What now? The line crackled, then cleared. Unscheduled landing. Incoming civilian freighter, no clearance. 1 survivor flagged. Critical. They're docking at Auxiliary Bay 3. He was already halfway into his jacket. Do we have a medical assessment? Preliminary skin only. Internal hemorrhaging. Possible respiratory collapse. Unknown contaminant detected. Of course there is. By the time he reached the medical wing, Veln was already there in full containment garb, flanked by 2 new auxiliaries from the Zentari Quadrant, both of them twitchy, fresh out of interspecies diagnostics training, and visibly rattled. The gurney came in fast and low, the patient wrapped in a polymer sheet that hissed as it adjusted to fluctuations in body temperature. Joshua caught sight of the face, barely more than a mask of purple swelling and cracked skin. A human. Male. Mid-30s. Velm didn't look up. We need cellular breakdown analysis, toxin isolation, and an artificial lung assist. Now, Joshua grabbed a set of gloves, already running through his mental checklist. Vitals. Unstable. Oxygen saturation at 52. Cardiac rhythm erratic. We're losing him. Right. Get me a thoracic tap. I need to know what's filling those lungs. The auxiliary on the left flinched. You're going to puncture the pleura without imaging? Joshua didn't answer. He had already sterilized the site and slid the needle between the ribs, just under the third. A hiss of dark fluid burst into the collection chamber, viscous, nearly black. That's not blood, he said. Correct, Velm replied. It contains fungal spores and silica particulates, not native to any cataloged atmosphere. Joshua leaned closer to the patient's mouth. The air being pushed through the emergency respirator smelled like scorched plastic and wet moss. He was breathing this stuff. The freighter originated from Sector Vornis, Velm added. Moon colony. Mining operation. No prior record of biohazards. Joshua looked at the fluid again. That moon's crust is loaded with borosilicates. If spores nested in the mining dust, he's drowning from the inside. Can we filter it? Not fast enough. We need to swap the lungs. The auxiliaries stared in horror. Velm didn't blink. We do not have a compatible donor. Not permanently, Joshua said. Temporarily. Just long enough to stabilize him. Hook up the artificial assist, but reroute it through an external saline bath. We'll oxygenate through the fluid directly. That is not a recognized protocol. It is now. The setup took 15 minutes. The man flatlined once during setup, and again 6 minutes later. Both times Joshua brought him back. The third time, he didn't crash. By 5 o'clock, the patient was breathing through a transparent tank that bubbled like an aquarium. His chest had stopped spasming. Joshua peeled off his gloves, soaked with fluid and sweat. Velm observed him. You improvised. Joshua leaned against the wall. I adapted. The auxiliaries stood silent, staring at the tank. One of them finally spoke. That wasn't in any of the manuals. Neither was the parasite, Joshua replied. You'll get used to that. Later that day, Joshua was called to a meeting with the station's upper medical contingent. 8 species sat around a hexagonal table, each looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The lead, a tall, feathered being named Iquan, addressed him first. How did you determine the patient's lungs could withstand direct fluid exchange? I didn't. I gambled. This violates protocol. He'd be dead otherwise. Another leaned forward. Its skin was translucent, revealing a shifting network of capillaries beneath. And if the spores reactivate? I've already started a retroviral agent to inhibit growth. But we need samples from the mining site. If this contaminant spreads, it won't stop with lungs. Iquan tapped a claw against the table. You are not authorized to lead containment missions. I'm not asking to lead. I'm asking for transit clearance. I'll go alone. There was a long silence. Then Velm, who had been standing off to the side, stepped forward. He has already demonstrated an ability to resolve extreme biological threats. His procedural outcomes exceed our predictive models. Joshua folded his arms. That's a very diplomatic way of saying I don't die easy. They gave him the authorization an hour later. By 2100 hours, he was aboard a scout craft barebones, short range, with just enough shielding to make atmospheric descent without frying his bones. He brought only a med kit, a filtration mask, and 3 protein bars. The moon was gray and cratered, with mining platforms scattered like broken toys across its surface. The air was thin and sharp with static. His boots crunched over fine dust that shimmered under the low sky. Inside the main shaft, he found what he was looking for. The fungal growth was not just alive, it was thriving. Bulbous sacs clung to the walls, pulsing faintly. One had burst recently, releasing a fine powder that still hung in the air. He sealed his mask tighter and took a sample. Halfway back to the exit, his comms crackled. Joshua, this is Velm. Status. I've got spores. Live and active. This stuff's evolved to survive in a vacuum-sealed environment. It's metabolizing silicates directly. Velm was silent for a beat. That is not biologically feasible. It is now. Back on the station, he entered the lab, still dusty, and laid the specimen in a quarantine dish. The spores reacted instantly to light, curling inward. He introduced a drop of saline. They swelled. Introduced ethanol. They divided. He leaned back. They're synthetic. Velm, who had been monitoring from the adjacent bioglass, frowned. Artificially engineered. Not necessarily, but definitely mutated beyond natural evolution. Something's accelerated their adaptability. Intentional, or just a side effect of the mining equipment. Either way, we've got a problem. If these things spread beyond the moon, they'll clog up every filtration system in the sector. They worked overnight synthesizing a counteragent. The spores resisted everything at first heat, pressure, even radiation. It wasn't until Joshua remembered an old trick from a chemical spill in Ecuador that they made progress. He combined a chlorine-iron compound with a buffering agent usually used to disinfect fish tanks. The spores shriveled within seconds. They'll watch the dish. That is not an elegant solution. No. But it works. The next step was deployment. The mining colony was evacuated. Joshua personally installed the dispersal units in the main shafts, watching as the mist turned the once pulsing walls into brittle husks. 2 days later, the patient whose name was revealed to be Milo Reyes opened his eyes. Joshua was there when he did. "Where am I?" "Alive," Joshua said. "That's good enough for now." Milo coughed once, then looked at the tank beside him. "Why does it smell like fish?" "Long story." Velen entered with a data pad. "He will recover. Lung tissue is regenerating. No residual contamination." Joshua nodded. "Good." As he left the room, one of the Zentari auxiliaries intercepted him. "You're not a doctor." "No," Joshua said. "Just stubborn." The auxiliary hesitated. "They're calling it the Halen exchange method. I'd prefer they didn't. But of course, they would." 3 days later, a research team from the Arkan Directive requested a full genomic sequence of the spores. They wanted to know how a contaminant could evolve that fast, adapt that well, and still be defeated by aquarium cleaner. Joshua handed over the sample and left the lab. He had a maintenance shaft to fix in Deck 12. The air was too dry, and someone had broken the humidity regulator again. He preferred that. Spores didn't argue. Regulators didn't mutate. And no one expected you to name a procedure after duct tape. The water reclamation system on Deck 6 burst at 4:42 in the morning. No alarms, just a sharp increase in humidity and a steady, low gurgle that became a cascade. By the time Joshua reached the maintenance shaft, his boots were sloshing through ankle-deep runoff, and the air smelled like algae fermenting in a used sock. 2 engineers from the Skellen League were already on site, staring into the ruptured pipe like it had insulted their ancestors. One of them turned as Joshua approached, his 4 arms crossed tightly. "You were supposed to recalibrate the pressure valve 2 cycles ago. You were supposed to replace the compression ring," Joshua said, pulling a rusted chunk of metal from the base of the pipe. "This is barely holding molecular cohesion. It's a miracle it didn't disintegrate a week ago." The Skellen engineer hissed something under his breath, but stepped aside. Joshua dropped to one knee and started clearing the sealant foam with a thermal blade. Behind him, water continued trickling down the corridor toward the waste treatment unit. A dozen sanitation drones hovered nearby, blinking in indecision. "Could one of you reroute the overflow before we end up recycling our own socks?" Joshua said without looking up. None of them moved. He sighed, pulled his comm unit, and pinged Central Control. "This is Halen. I need fluid redirection from Deck 6 junctions B through F immediately." The control officer on duty, a deep-voiced Yulari with poor grasp of sarcasm, responded instantly. "We do not prioritize minor leaks. It's not a leak. It's the start of a microbial swamp. You want to explain to command why half the station smells like fermented kelp?" There was a pause, then a grudging confirmation. The flow slowed. Joshua slotted a new compression ring, one of the spare Earth manufactured ones he kept hidden in his personal locker because he didn't trust the station's procurement cycle, and resealed the joint. 15 minutes later, water flow returned to nominal, though the smell lingered. The Skellen engineers muttered something about human improvisation and wandered off. By the time Joshua made it back to the upper deck, his coveralls were soaked and his left boot squelched with every step. He stopped by the med wing to swap for dry gear when Velen intercepted him at the entrance. "There was an incident," Velen said. "If it's another parasite, I'm going to scream." "No." A diplomatic envoy from the Praxel Combine arrived unannounced. One of them collapsed during quarantine screening. Joshua rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Collapsed how?" "Unexplained neurological event. The attending physician triggered a full lockdown of the isolation suite." "Did you scan for toxins?" "There were none. But the patient experienced a full systemic convulsion after exposure to a visual pattern on the station's entry signage." Joshua stopped. "You're saying the font gave him a seizure?" "Yes. I'm going to need more coffee." They entered the isolation suite, where the Praxel envoy was suspended in a low-gravity diagnostic field. His limbs floated as if underwater, twitching sporadically. Two neural interface bands circled his temples, feeding data into his side console. Joshua scanned the readout. Cerebral oscillation looks like a visual epilepsy spike, but those are usually triggered by light pulses, not glyphs. The glyph in question was the station's name. Joshua glanced at the signage on the wall. In Standard. In Praxel. He frowned. Wait, you're saying their own language triggered a seizure? Yes. Joshua stared at the envoy's face. The skin was translucent, stretched tight over a lattice of bioluminescent veins. His pupils were irregular, dilated differently in each eye. Have you ruled out neurodegenerative disease? No signs of cellular decay. What about chemical imbalance? Electrolyte failure? Baseline levels are normal. Joshua exhaled. Let me try something. He walked over to the console and accessed the visual log from the moment of collapse. The screen replayed the entry moment, the envoy stepping off the shuttle, glancing at the sign, then immediately seizing. Rewind. Pause on the glyph. The image froze. Joshua leaned in. That's not Praxel script. It is their standard diplomatic dialect. No, it isn't. I worked with a Praxel translator during the Helix Accord negotiations. Their diplomatic dialect doesn't use recursive characters. This is ceremonial script. Velen tilted its head. What is the difference? In ceremonial script, each symbol carries a layered meaning and is processed by different parts of their brain. If you display them in the wrong sequence, it creates a neurological feedback loop. It's not language. It's code. So the station signage triggered a full cognitive overload. Yeah, like showing a strobe light to someone with photosensitive epilepsy, but in their language cortex instead. Velen stared at the envoy. He is not recovering, because the loop hasn't stopped. His brain is still trying to resolve the symbol. Joshua opened his pack and pulled out a portable display plate. He sketched a simplified version of the glyph, then stripped out the recursive elements one by one, reducing it to its root form. Put this on the ceiling above him. Velen hesitated. Why? He needs to see a corrected pattern. His brain stuck in an incomplete loop. This will let it finish. The plate was mounted. Within seconds, the envoy's twitching slowed. A full minute later, he opened his eyes. Joshua nodded. There it is. Velen walked with him back to the corridor. That was not a medical intervention. It was cognitive pattern recognition. You resolved a neurological emergency with a drawing. I paid attention in cross-cultural briefing, Joshua said. Most people slept through that part. The station's diplomatic liaison, a rigid, featherless avian named Surik, cornered Joshua later that evening. You violated containment protocol. I fixed your signage problem. Your actions could be interpreted as unsanctioned neurointervention, or as basic literacy. Surik's feathers bristled inward. The Combine is notoriously sensitive about ceremonial script. Then maybe don't slap it on a bulkhead without checking if it short-circuits their ambassadors. Your behavior continues to be unconventional. Is that your way of saying thank you? Surik walked off without responding. The next day, the signage was replaced with a neutral code marker. The Combine envoy requested a private audience with Joshua. The meeting was brief but strange, a Praxel gesture involving both palms pressed against a holographic field, followed by a gift, a smooth, polished cube that emitted a soft harmonic tone when held. What's it do? Joshua asked. The envoy blinked slowly. It harmonizes memory. Sure. Why not? He placed it on the shelf next to his half-crushed water filter and a dried-out fern from Earth. That evening, Jessa found him in the engineering bay. I heard you triggered a linguistic seizure. Not on purpose. You're making it hard for the rest of us to look competent. No one's stopping you from solving neurological crises with doodles. She leaned against the console. You're leaving in 2 days? Back to Earth. I've got a backlog of water systems to rework and a friend's wedding to attend. You're not going to miss this? I'm going to miss hot showers and breathable air that doesn't smell like burnt magnesium. But not the parasites. Or seizure glyphs. Nope. She handed him a small envelope. What's this? Station commendation. They're naming the new signage protocol after you. Joshua opened it. Inside was a certificate with the words, the Halen Glyph Compliance Standard. He groaned. Please tell me they're joking. They're not. He stared at the certificate, then started laughing. Fine. I'll add it to the list. The shuttle departed the next morning. As the docking clamps released and the stars stretched into motion, Joshua leaned back in his seat. His bag was half tools, half improvised medical gear. The cube from the Praxel envoy hummed faintly from inside a side pocket. He closed his eyes. He'd be home by the end of the week. And with luck, no one would be trying to die in a new and confusing way for at least a month.